So hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is Cosmetics Business Live, the Roundup. So just to let you know, today's webinar is being recorded and I'll be sharing the recording at the end of the session. There's also going to be the chance for a Q&A towards the end, but please feel free to put questions in as we go along. Feel free to use the chat function if you want to share anything with anyone else that's part of the audience. Please feel free to be as interactive as you like throughout the webinar. So Cosmetics Business Live was a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it might be nice for me to share sort of a roundup of the presentation I gave myself, but also some key highlights that I found and just summarizing some of those key regulatory updates for anyone that either wasn't able to attend or that couldn't watch every session or who just wants a bit of a summary really. So yeah, it's kind of be a bit of a range today of some different topics, but it can get some ideas flowing. Maybe it might make you think about some regulations you haven't considered yet. And again, hopefully it will make it a really easy to digest format, which kind of summarizes some things that were discussed during the event. So the agenda today, as I said, I'm going to give a really quick run through the presentation I gave, just to give you the summary of the case study I went through, because I think it's a really helpful kind of summary of some consumer research things, which is obviously what we conduct at 18 Global Research. And then the other regulations that I've picked up on, so the other presentations that I wanted to highlight is a spotlight on India, microbiome, some EU regulatory updates, some US cosmetic regulations, and as well as changes in China. So these are really key regulations that I know my clients have asked about over the last few weeks or months. So I thought that they're quite nice to summarize, and I thought that generally for the audience today, you find these particular sort of topics quite interesting. So yes, there was a lot more topics there at the event, and these are just the ones that I've picked up on for today. So just to give you a bit of background about who I am, I'm the regulatory director at 18 Global Research, hence why I've kind of picked up on the regulation presentations, because anyone who knows who went to cosmetics business, it covered lots of things in the cosmetics regulation, in the cosmetics industry, but regulations is the one thing that I wanted to pick up on for obvious reasons. So yeah, as I mentioned, we conduct consumer research, and I'll touch on that in my my kind of summary of my presentation. So I really focus on advertising regulations and cosmetic regulations globally to make sure that the data we're providing for our clients is going to be compliant for them to use in their advertising. So, as I said, I'll do a really quick summary of my presentation, which was called Consumer Research, Trials and Tribulations. So really thinking about what consumer research is, how it can benefit a brand, and how it can benefit a marketing campaign, but also the things what not to do, or to be really wary of as well, to make sure you do conduct the right research, you've got the right evidence you need, and you're using it for the right reasons as well. So for anyone who doesn't know, just a really quick summary of what consumer research is. So we talk about things like advertising substantiation and clinical research and consumer research, but what does it all actually mean? So consumer research basically means perception claims, anything that can be substantiated through a consumer's opinion that they can self-assess themselves. So clinical claims are obviously going down the route of measurement. So it might be something like hair is 10 times stronger. So we've done a measurement to say, yeah, we've kind of tested the hair before and after the product, measure how strong it is using some very technical instruments. Whereas with consumer research, we might say something like 90% of people agree that their hair feels stronger. So things that the consumer can perceive themselves, basically. Why do we do this? Well, we want to reflect the actual conditions of the product in use. So instead of kind of saying, if we had a kind of wrinkle claim, kind of helping diminish the appearance of wrinkles, you could obviously use a really high-tech camera and say, okay, well, before and after we apply this cream, we can see what percentage the wrinkles are decreased by. But actually, can a consumer really perceive that when they purchase the product? So we're making sure that we're looking at claims that, are really in actual use, in real life circumstances. So when a consumer picks your product up off the shelf and takes it home to use, we're replicating that whole process with those claims alongside it. So we call them in-home studies because we tend to send them to, for people to test at home. There might be other circumstances where maybe we test a professional product or do a kind of in central location test, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to be an in-home user study where, again, people are testing it in the comfort of their own home, the same that they would if they purchased your products. And we're really replicating that as well. We can look at things like product comparisons as well as products being tested on their own. So yeah, it really depends on what those claims are you're looking to make. And obviously for some claims, you may need that additional evidence as well. So there could be some sort of what we call like maybe stronger claims. Something like hair growth, for example, we tend to need something like clinical evidence alongside some consumer research to make sure that we've got a really good body of evidence behind our claims. So if someone was to complain about it and say that it doesn't work, we're very, very confident that actually we have enough data to say that it does do what we want it to do. So we do gap analysis with clients as well. So if you're ever unsure, you can send us your list of claims and we can really recommend what's the best research to use. So just to, like I said, do a very quick sort of summary of the presentation, the main thing that I wanted to bring up, which is the most important for any consumer research study, is having very clear research objectives. Now, this sounds really obvious, but actually, if you don't take the time to go and think about what your research objectives are and how you're going to use the data at the end, it's almost going to be a waste of the resource that you have, because you could go, okay, well, we've done a consumer research study, but we didn't ask this and we didn't think about that and we didn't do that. We've got to run another one and another one and keep going back. Whereas if you have a really clear picture about why it is that you want to conduct the research at the beginning, it can make sure that you have, the most valuable data you can possibly get. So I basically put together this list of questions, which is essentially the questions that I would ask my clients if they came to me and said they wanted to conduct some research, to really think about how we then structure what those research objectives are. So the main thing is thinking about claim substantiation in particular. What are the main benefits your product provides? So I can't tell you what people sort of say to me, like, I've got a face serum, what should I ask them? What should I ask questions about? But really, every serum has been formulated differently. The ingredients in it will have certain, benefits that we already know about. And we're trying to make sure that we put together all these ingredients, it's actually being delivered. And as I said, it's being perceived by the consumer. So the first thing to always think about is, what is the main benefit your product provides? What is the consumer going to get out of it? Why have you made the product? What's made you want to formulate it? So that's always the first step. Then we think about the key claims, because obviously that could be, 20 different benefits on our product. So that's great. But if you think about putting a product on the shelf, if you had 20 different claims on it, it's almost overwhelming to a consumer. So then we're thinking about, okay, we've got all these 20 benefits, but what is the selling aspect, the main unique selling point for this product? And that becomes our key claims. So it's usually around 5. And that means that we can really focus on how we're going to design the study to focus on not all of the benefits, not just all the benefits, but those key claims as well. It's important to think about what countries your main markets are, because obviously things are different slightly with the legislation, the consumers are slightly different. So if you kind of are based in the UK and you say, okay, we're just testing the UK because we're based here, but actually your main market is the UAE, they're 2 very different countries in terms of skin types, ambient temperatures, hair types, culture, price points. There's so many things that are very different. So when it actually comes to selling your product, again, it's not going to give you the most value for money out of your data if you've got the product tested in a completely different territory than your main market. Or you, even better, will test it across different markets as well. So we're not kind of limited, we're completely global. So when we're thinking about those key territories, we might select 2 or 3 key countries that really reflect that kind of overall main markets. Obviously, think about when the benefits could be perceived. So again, people say, it's a serum, how long should I test it for? Well, again, every product is slightly different. There are some serums that have instant results, and that's pretty much it. So it might be, I don't know, it gives you kind of a youthful glow, and because of the product in it, it kind of makes your skin a bit shiny, a bit glowy. It's kind of instant. So we might do a kind of a week or two study on that. Then there are serums that promise to maybe even out the skin tone, get rid of fine lines and wrinkles, or to, like, reduce the appearance of them, and all of these kinds of things as well. So obviously the study is going to be slightly longer, because we need to be able to see how that benefit builds up over time. So again, it's really think about how you're going to market the product as well. And on that note as well, some people kind of go, I'm going to rush the study and just won't get the results as quick as possible. But actually, it helps you sell more products. If you say to your consumer, it's going to take 8 weeks for the best benefits, and we've got some data to prove that, well, people are going to keep buying it until they have that 8 weeks or use or whatever. So it can be a really good selling point there. Think about where you'll be displaying the claims. Again, it might have different regulatory impacts, but also it's just important for us to think about, how we can best present the claims, what kind of claims we can use that will really suit that platform. What other marketing claims you can make? Very obvious ones like, I would recommend the product, I would buy the product. But again, this is all based on opinion. It's the one time that you can get the opinions of people and find out how they would use, what claims will really resonate with them in particular that are to do with opinion, rather than just a scientific measurement. Any other marketing material, testimonials, photos, videos, again, think about this all at this point and when you're just thinking about what your research objectives are, because then we can build it all into the study. And as well as our main markets, what other things make your key consumer? Are you being very inclusive? Do you want a diverse range of skin tones, of skin colors, of hair types? Do you want to make sure you've covered all the consumers? Do you have a very specific target you're looking for? People with sensitive or eczema prone skin? It's all stuff to think about now, because again, we can't kind of go back on it and get different volunteers. Once the volunteers are recruited and the study's gone out, we'll just base it on the target consumer you've let us know about. So then I want to take you through the case study that I went through in the presentation, because it kind of summarizes, again, really good practice throughout the study design process, and then how we use that data as well. So this is from Temple Spa, which is a UK luxury holistic cosmetic brand, if you haven't heard of them before. They have this wonderful product called the Truffle Delight. So it's a very luxurious, rich moisturizer. Their objectives, so their research objectives, was to test the product for the efficacy, so make sure it actually works, get that product feedback, and to substantiate their advertising claims in the UK. They also wanted to gain testimonials to use in their marketing. And the claims they really wanted to do, their key claims, is to say that they all work with oily skin types. So all of the claims they've got will work with the oily skin type. So the methodology for this one, in-home user study, which I've already mentioned about in the UK, because that's where they want to substantiate the claims. There is an interesting side of that as well, which I'll come on to in the panel criteria. It's a single placement study, so there's no comparison, we're just testing it on its own. It's 28 days because, as I mentioned, we know that these claims are going to have the best perception after 28 days, but we want to get some feedback about the initial use, but also after the 4 weeks usage. So the panel criteria. So again, this is where we think about our target consumer. And as I said, it's slightly interesting for this one. So we had 70% female and 30% male, which is quite common for a lot of cosmetic brands, because they want to be inclusive of different genders. But of course, their target consumer, their main consumer, does tend to be female. So we want to make sure we get their opinion the most. We've got an age range of people that will have things like aging skin. We've got UK demographic for 50% of it. So this is where we say, of the UK, what ethnicities have we got? Let's reflect that. But then 50% of it, we just wanted to focus on the Asian ethnicities. Now, this is because after substantiating their claims here, they really wanted to launch into China. So we wanted to make sure that we were reflecting that ethnicity at a large scale. So without obviously getting the cultural feedback necessarily, or the ambient temperature, we were seeing that the product actually works with those skin types. So it's kind of killing two birds with one stone, doing a bit of market research into that skin type in particular, whilst also making sure that we've got the UK study. Obviously, there's all skin types as well, including sensitive, obviously presenting some kind of oily skin, because that's what we want to be able to reflect as well. So the test conditions, again, we are making sure that we're replicating the usage directions they're going to get, as I said earlier, reflecting the actual conditions of use. So this is what will be on the pack copy. So it's a 4-week study, as I mentioned, so they'll use it every single day. The usage directions, again, is what's going to be on their pack, applications, face and neck, and obviously we provide any safety instructions as well. So it's all quite straightforward, but again, we're just replicating that actual use. So once we've sent the study out to those people, they've tested the product at home, they've answered the questionnaire time points as we kind of mentioned earlier. We then get a report at the end of the study. Sorry, I've got a bit of a dry mouth. So I've lifted this from our report. And it's right at the end of the report, we basically get a summary which says all of the questions that were asked. As you can see, it asked as statements. We then ask the consumers if they agree or disagree, who actually agreed with those statements, and what can we use as claims. So in this case, we have our statements on the left. We've got the number of people that had a satisfied, neutral, or not satisfied answer, and then we have the percentage of people that were satisfied, neutral, or not satisfied. So obviously, we're really interested in the percentage because that's what we lift out. Well, A, the percentage is important because we find out have the majority of people agreed with the claim. And then B, that's what we tend to lift out and put into our advertising. So in the case of the first claim, skin being instantly moisturized, we would say 95% of people agree that their skin feels instantly moisturized. So it's really high claims on this one, as you can see. As I said, I've just selected a few questions just to give you a little idea of what we managed to substantiate. But some great questions there about the skin being instantly moisturized, feeling smooth, feeling hydrated, and having a healthy looking radiant glow. So some really nice sort of key marketing words there and terms. As you can see, they're all things that people can perceive. So that's what's really important. We haven't asked anything that a consumer wouldn't be able to realistically perceive themselves. So then I just wanted to give you a quick little look at how they've presented these claims on their social media accounts, so Facebook and Instagram. And as you can see, it looks really effective. So sort of saying what the key claims are they picked up on those really high percentages and presenting them on their social media there as well. And as you can see, they're kind of mentioning how many people it was tested on, which is very important as well. So yeah, that's kind of how we're presenting our claims there. So that was, as I said, I did a bit more in the presentation, but it gives you an idea of what I presented at Cosmetics Business. The summary basically to take home from that is that clear research objectives will guide the entire process. A well-designed study and questionnaire is essential for valuable data. You have to ensure your data is compliant in the country you're selling it in, so be aware of the regulations. You need to present your evidence clearly in your advertising to avoid scrutiny, and you should always use recent evidence in your advertising. So if you're looking at your evidence and you think it's about 10 years old, it might be time to refresh it because formulations change, opinions change, new products come out. It's always really good to have some recent evidence there. The other thing I wanted to sort of bring up from this presentation is the questions that were asked. So I've put all the questions here, although some of them probably aren't as relevant to the presentation or the content, but gives you an idea of what was asked, because sometimes people see questions and think, that's what I wanted to ask as well, or that's a really interesting point. So yes, that is, I kind of thought I'd go through those today. So interestingly, the first question was about claims stating that the formula or the ingredients work on the dermis or the epidermis only. So things like promote cell repair or collagen production. Now this was an interesting question because obviously this isn't something consumers can perceive. So it's really out of the remit of this presentation. But generally my advice for this kind of claim or any kind of claim is it's really about the evidence. If you've got evidence on the dermis level that a product works on, of course, in this case, it would have to be very clinical evidence and instrumental study, then that's how you can present it. So there's no sort of clear set answer for every single claim, but for any claim, you need to have a body of evidence behind it. Another question was that, are there any special regulatory considerations in the sector for consumer studies? So obviously the two key kind of groups, there's obviously lots of different regulatory considerations, but the two key groups that I would bring up here is cosmetic regulation. So every country's cosmetic regulation tends to have some kind of regulation about what claims can be used, what evidence can be used for what claim. But then also on the other side, you have advertising regulation. So a lot of countries have a self-regulatory organization who regulates adverts in that country, and they have a code of conduct which again goes through what types of evidence are appropriate for different for different types of claims. Again, every claim is different, but in terms of broad grouping, we can think about it. But I would always seek advice. Like I said, you can always ask us what kind of claims you have and what kind of evidence would be appropriate. I think this one came from, I gave a comment on a supplement study during the presentation. For supplements, is 6 months really the minimum to get valid consumer feedback? Now, again, it really depends on the product. There's no set rule. Every supplement's slightly different. It's very common for us to conduct supplement studies that are as long as 6 months, because obviously when you're ingesting something, you're actually changing the, what do you call that? I'm trying to think of the word now. You have like a deficiency. Basically, a supplement is helping with the dietary deficiency. And those deficiencies, when kind of given something, a supplement, a vitamin or an ingredient, that's when over time you can start to see sort of beauty from the inside out. So yeah, for supplements, I think the shortest supplement study I've probably done is 2 months. But yeah, for other supplements, much longer. And we get those time points of the question as we go through, so we can see when maybe the best effect has happened. There's also a question to say, in the case of makeup, what are the main pointers we should take in consideration for consumer studies? So for makeup, again, it's quite a broad question. Every product's going to be slightly different. But obviously for color cosmetics, consumer studies tend to be quite preferred, because again, it's really based on opinion. Whereas for skincare, or hair care, it might be those more kind of scientific claims generally, or a bit of both, bit of a mixture. So yeah, consumer studies basically are very preferred for makeup, and I can't really give much more information on that one without some more specific kind of information. So as I said, there's the questions I had. I just wanted to share them all with you, just to give you an idea of what kind of things was there. I can see some questions coming in, but I want to wait towards the end of the presentation, but I will answer your question. But yeah, we'll get through the whole rest of the presentation first, and then I'll go through some questions there. But as I said, we've been talking a lot about regulation within that, so that really leads us on to the nice sort of next section that I wanted to give today, which is the highlights that I found from other people's presentations at the Cosmetic Business Live event. So we had the India regulatory expert at Eco Monday gave us a really good presentation on all the new regulations for cosmetics exports in India. So I thought, again, I've just taken the key findings from my presentation. Obviously, this is all for every single presentation I'm about to go through. I have really given you the key points. There's obviously a half-hour presentation out there for each one. So I would really recommend watching the presentations back if you can, or asking Cosmetics Business if they have them on demand, if you want to hear more information about these. But I just wanted to pick up on the highlights. So really important information for India if you're thinking of selling there. So the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare have published Cosmetic Rules 2020, and that came out in December 2020. So if you haven't seen those already and you are selling there, you need to make sure you have a look at that. And that includes updates for import, manufacture, labeling, sale and distribution of cosmetics in India. So pretty much the whole process of making a product. So obviously it's going to be really important. From our side, the labeling regulations are going to be very important, because if there's anything about the way claims are displayed on there, that's going to be really important for us to be aware of as well. There is some new application and registration forms that have been introduced. So again, make sure that you're aware of those if you are selling there. There's some new fees applicable. So some fees have been reduced in terms of that registration process. There are some fees that are reduced and some that have increased when I was looking through it. So again, be really aware of what those fees are. And there's been a concept of new cosmetics which has been introduced. So this is basically it's any novel ingredient that has never been contained in any cosmetic before anywhere in the world. So it's quite broad. It's literally anything that has a new ingredient as well. So not the new final product, but if there's a new ingredient within that product, it is subject to different regulations, which is the new cosmetics regulations. So again, if you're kind of quite innovative and you think you'll be using really new ingredients, you need to be really wary of that when selling in India. So I thought that was a really important thing to bring up. The next topic was from My Microbiome, from their discussion on the do's and don'ts for skin microbiome, which, as we all know, is quite a hot topic at the moment, actually, particularly in the world of cosmetics. So I was really interested to see what they were discussing. And generally, unsurprisingly, there is a lack of regulation for cosmetics and microbiome. We've seen it, some of the big players in the game. So, for example, Unilever earlier this year got in hot water for microbiome claims on cosmetics. Now, Unilever are incredibly experienced. They wouldn't have done that. They're not sort of being naive and you don't know. They genuinely thought that they could make those claims and had the regulatory team to support it. So that's where it's really interesting to think this is because there's a lack of regulation and understanding and support from cosmetics and microbiome. Claims around the microbiome are often not scientifically substantiated either. So there are quite broad sweeping claims you see on the market that do seem a bit how did that come from? Because generally there's just not a lot of understanding about the microbiome and how cosmetics actually kind of impact them. So as it says here, that they mentioned there is a lack of scientific research behind the improvement of skin microbiome. There's not enough people investing in the research. Everyone's jumping on a bandwagon a bit and not really investing that time to research how it does actually impact the skin microbiome. So the only current claims that there should be, so if you are using microbiome claims or you're thinking of using them, the only kind of claims that are actually quite well substantiated is that it does not harm or it respects the skin microbiome, or that it improves conditions that can be assessed. So acne or eczema, because obviously, as you know, like we can't say, okay, the microbiome has been improved. We don't necessarily know that. But if there's certain kind of skin conditions that we can see are improving with this product, like eczema or acne, that's when we can start to use those claims because it's easy to assess. We can perceive it. So that was quite interesting. Generally as well, the definition of pro, pre, and postbiotics is missing. So there's three groups of microbiome biotics that are used. I've actually got a slide from a previous webinar I did, which I wanted to share with you on this, about the definitions, because again, it's actually not very clear to the consumer what is actually happening with the different biotics, which would say they can do different things to the microbiome. So for skincare, there's three different approaches, which is the pro, pre, and postbiotics. And basically, here's the definition. So probiotics are with good bacteria, and they increase the number of bacteria on the skin. So we're saying we're increasing the good bacteria. The prebiotics are a food source for that good bacteria, so that promotes their growth. So it's not actually putting bacteria on the skin, but it's helping to feed the bacteria that is on there, the good bacteria. Then we have postbiotics, which is basically looking at, sorry, I'm going to read it through again because it's been a while since I read this through. They're basically looking at improving the composition of the skin's beneficial bacteria, optimizing optimizing the skin pH. So either used with pre or probiotics. Gosh, these are tongue twisters, aren't they? To be treatments for the skin. Again, I'm probably not the most scientific person in the world to talk about this, but I had this slide from beforehand. I thought that was really interesting that they mentioned that it's not often clear, because as we can see, they're doing different things. So you can't just sort of say, it's good for the skin microbiome, because how is it good? What's it actually doing to the biome? What's it doing to the bacteria on the skin? How is it improving it? Then we've got the EU key regulatory updates. So the Obelisk group highlighted the cosmetic regulation updates that have happened this year. So obviously, we know there's been a bit interesting this year with the kind of change with the EU and the UK. So we're looking at the EU side. Now, what was quite important as a big note is that some ingredients are being banned in the EU. I've just included a couple of examples there, because this is something that we've been in contact with our clients about for Lilial and zinc pyrithione, which have been banned from March 2022, but there's lots of ingredients with lots of different dates on there. So you need to make sure you're reformulating your cosmetics if they do have these ingredients in them. And because of that, it's really important to think about whether your claims are still substantiated with the new formulation. And that's why we've been discussing a lot of these with our clients, assessing the change in the formulation, assessing the data they have, and then making a decision on whether they need to retest the product. So it's very important to be aware of this and think about how your claims are going to be substantiated. Otherwise, it's a very important step that I'm not sure if everybody's going to be considering, because when you register your product in certain countries, for example, China, you need to provide your claim substantiation evidence alongside the report, which says what the INCI list is. And if they say that INCI list doesn't match this report, which it might not, obviously those claims are not going to be compliant. So be very wary about changes in formulation and your evidence behind your claims. There's some new labeling regulations to do with plastic in products. So any product that has plastic in it needs to have this new label on it, and that's required from the 3rd of July, so very, very soon. So again, you can find out more information about that, but I thought that was quite a key update if you haven't already looked into it. There's some that can be provided as a sticker, so if you haven't got to change your whole label necessarily, but you need to stick this sticker on. So be very wary. And then also a Brexit reminder for the UK and EU responsible person. Of course, most of you would have already done this because this came in January when we left the EU. But if you haven't, if you're not currently selling in both territories and you're not aware of this, you need to now have both a UK and EU responsible person, whereas before you just had to have an EU responsible person. There is a 2-year transition period to relabel your products. So as I mentioned, if you're already selling in the EU and UK, you should already have this 2 responsible persons in terms of regulation there. But if you do have this 2-year transition period to relabel your products. So very good key updates, I thought, from the EU cosmetic regulations, very clear. The US regulations as well. So Safe Fast and Sure provided some key overviews of the US regulations. And what I found really interesting is they gave this great highlight of what can lead to class actions. So I mentioned in my presentation that a lot of countries have a self-regulatory organization which regulates the adverts in those countries, and you have to be aware of their code of conduct. In the US, they do have a self-regulatory organization, but it's more federal. So you've got the Federal Trade Commission and the FDA, which is the Food and Drink Administration. So it's federal organizations, and consumers sue over there. There's a big sue culture in the US, as we know. So this is where we're going, okay, well, what's some really common pitfalls that can lead to class action lawsuits? So what you really want to avoid over there. So false claims and ingredient disclosures. So obviously any misleading claims, not having the evidence behind your products is really up there at the top. And ingredient disclosures, again, not being clear about what the ingredients are in your product and what the benefits or the, what they're in there to do. So real transparency, essentially, is really important. Fee disclosures and auto renewals. So this is quite common for subscription services. People subscribe by accident. It's not been clear to them. And if it's not clear, obviously you can get yourself led to a class action lawsuit. Failing to disclose side effects. So that's obviously really important. If there's any chance of a side effect from your product, you must be very, very clear to consumer what they are. Product packaging malfunctions. That's quite an interesting one. I didn't really know this could lead to class action lawsuits, but over there, apparently it's really, it can be really important. So make sure that your packaging has been tested, it's quality, it's suitable for the product, because obviously you could be in some real hot water otherwise. And they said some real claims they've seen in particular are oil-free and natural claims. So anything that's oil-free, people are stating oil free and then actually in the ingredients there are oils in them. So that's been quite a big one. And natural claims is a scary one because obviously lots of different legislation out there about what natural means, and it's the same in the US. There's not a lot of clear guidance actually. So some organizations are saying that it has to be 100% natural. Others are saying that it has to include the majority of natural ingredients. So I would just be very cautious about making natural claims, essentially. And again, be very transparent. That's the best thing you can do with any claim, I think, is be very transparent about what that data is, about what that means, what do you think it means, and keep, and then well, anything that doesn't seem like you're hiding something, otherwise that's when you could get into trouble. So there was some pending legislations from 2019 that are still pending in the US, which are all surrounding product safety. So I think I just want to bring those up as a kind of keep an eye on this space, because they're pending. I guess they could be introduced at any time. And actually, if you do have access to this presentation that Safe Arthur and Shaw gave, I think it would be good to look at and see what those legislations are. And then California has introduced some state-specific regulations, cosmetic regulations, over the last few years. So again, if you're selling in the US, make sure that you're looking at the state-specific regulations as well, because California certainly does have some specific ones, and many of them actually really echo the EU cosmetic regulations, which I thought was quite interesting when I was looking at it. So yeah, if you're compliant in the EU, most likely you're compliant in California, which is great. And then I want to talk about some regulatory shifts that have happened in China. So as we know, we've got a new China cosmetic regulations that came in December. And Delphic HSE provided some guidance about what those new regulations are. So I wanted to share those with you as well. So imported general cosmetics are now subject to some simplified requirements, which is great. So we now have a very clear idea of special use cosmetics and general cosmetics. And there's slightly simplified ones for imported general cosmetics now as well. So again, great to know. I think it's much clearer in terms of claims. They've got some fantastic guidance on what claim substantiation can be used for specific claims in China. And I'm really happy to share that if anyone wants any more information. The product notification process with the NMPA replaces the previous authorization processes. So the NMPA are now where you do all your product notification. As I mentioned, that's where you put in your claim substantiation and all of your reports. So that's really important to know. There's a new domestic responsible person system. So as we mentioned, same in the EU, you've got a UK and EU responsible person. You now need a domestic responsible person in China. So please do take a look at that. There's also the exemption of animal testing, apart from some certain, so yeah, huge news in the exemption of animal testing. I think everyone's really pleased about it, as many brands chose not to sell in China whatsoever because of animal testing regulations. So now there is generally an exemption for imported products for animal testing, apart from very clear rules on products for children and infants, products with new ingredients, or anything that is not got a GMP status. So quite straightforward there. But again, I think there's going to be some continuous updates here in China. So they were kind of the main key takeaways there. Great. So I'm sure that's a lot of information. Like I said, I really wanted to bring up some highlights and get people's kind of juices flowing in terms of what those regulations are. But I'm really happy to take some questions now. I'm just going to check, because I think I've had a question come in already earlier on. Oh, so someone's had poor connectivity and can't hear fully. So yes, I will be posting this recording and I'll be emailing it to everyone who's attended today as well. So you'll get a recording of the presentation. So yeah, you can have a look at that. I haven't got any more questions coming in right now, so I'm guessing no one's got any questions, which is absolutely fine. I will send out my contact information again, so you can just contact me directly if you kind of come away from it or watch the recording and think you've got some questions afterwards. That's no problem. So I'll just finish up for today. So upcoming webinars, I have a webinar next week, next Thursday, with our Brazilian expert, which is Macon Ribeiro. We're going to be looking at formulating cosmetics, in particular for aerosols. So he'll be looking at how you formulate those products, what the considerations, what the regulatory considerations, and I'll be looking at how we test those products and what kind of claims we would expect to make. And then I am also going to be doing a presentation. It's a couple of weeks that I'll be doing some other events, and then I'll be back on the 9th of July for launching a brand internationally. And I'll have guests, Jessica Quick and Denise from Buzz Beauty. So they will be joining me, and we'll be talking about their book, Whip Fire Money, which is a breakdown of how to launch a brand internationally. And I'll be talking about some of the testing implications there as well. So I think that'd be a fantastic presentation. Just some attention to the SCS, the Society of Cosmetic Scientists. They have a diploma course on the essentials of cosmetic science, which is a distance learning course, so you can do it anywhere in the world at any time. Feel free to look at their website. And we are proud to be sponsoring the IFSCC Congress on the 19th to 22nd of September 2022, and you can register your interest for the event at their website now. There's my contact information, but I'll be emailing it over. So for now, thank you very much for listening today. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I'll be in touch soon. Thank you.